informed we have no PA today. I don't know what happened, but that's the case. So those of us who are up here will be trying to project back to the back seats as much as possible. I have laryngitis, and I know it's very fashionable these days to be hoarse when you're in group, like Bill Clinton, but it's very difficult, actually, when you're trying to project. I'm Carol Hurwitz. I'm the program coordinator for the Holocaust Lecture Series, and I want to welcome you to another session, which will be a very interesting day with the Oral History Project from San Francisco. But I have a few other announcements to make first. One is that for those of you who are in Soc and Women's Studies, and in some of the other categories, your midterm paper is due today. Since this class has been very confusing, moving between rooms and changing some faculty and so forth, I'm sure some of us will accept papers through next Tuesday. But we would like you to get them to us by then so that we can read the midterms. If there's anybody else that still is not clear about their faculty of record or their syllabus, their requirements, please get to us because it's already midterm and you really need to be doing your work. I have one in terms of philosophy. The philosophy coordinator will be Ed Mooney, and his hours are 10 to 10:45 on Tuesdays, 12 to 1 on Thursdays. So if you have any other difficulties in terms of your philosophy requirements, please contact him. Slow down? Yes, slow down. I always talk too fast.
Philosophy people for credits here, philosophy students who are getting philosophy credits.
1, 2, 3.
All right.
4.
So I mean, it is you whom we are addressing at this point. So can you repeat
the hours?
Professor Ed Mooney in the philosophy department. You all know him. You've heard of his name, I'm sure. And his office hours are
10 until 10:45 on Tuesdays, 12 until 1 on Thursdays.
Ask the people who are sitting in the aisles to find seats.
Okay. Will the people who are sitting in the aisles or on the floor please find seats? There are plenty of seats, and we get in trouble with the fire marshal if we don't use the seats that we have. And we do have plenty today. The one other announcement I would like to make is that next week we have our featured speaker, Dr. and Sister Carol, who is a feminist Catholic educator from Pennsylvania. She'll be speaking on the subject, Different Voices, Women, and the Holocaust. This is a subject that we haven't dealt with in quite this detail before, so it should be exciting to hear what she has to say. She has a book that was just out this month with the same title, Different Voices, Women in the Holocaust, which is the one I'm using for my Women in the Holocaust class on Thursday night. So those of you who are in my class, the book is here now, so you can begin reading. Dr. Carol Rittner has had many, many roles as a social and political activist. She's worked with Elie Wiesel in the Foundation for Humanity. She's an educator in Catholic and feminist circles, and in addition, and in Holocaust circles, and she does nonviolence and mediation work in Northern Ireland on a regular basis. She's had a really interesting and versatile career, combining her Holocaust interests with her religious interests. So those of you in the religious community as well as the women's community will find it a really interesting event.
It is with great pleasure and I'm privileged to introduce to you today the two lecturers, Ms. Lani Silver and Mr. John. It is like welcoming a family to me personally because I've been working with them very closely and work with them still closer in the future, I'm sure. Now, they are in charge, and the founders, and in charge of the Oral History Project of San Francisco. And it's very important for us to realize how much work and how much and how much heart has went into that project which they have founded and initiated. They have conducted with their staff 1,300 interviews with survivors and witnesses of the Holocaust, which includes, of course, rescuers. Many of the Holocaust Interviewees come there for several reasons, namely, first of all, for the first time to talk about their experience, which at times they've never discussed before. So the important thing is it's not just a recording of historical events, which are singular, but it also has a very therapeutic meaning for those people who come and for the first time discuss some of the things which have burdened them and were not able to get off their chest. And they are facilitating this sort of discussion. So we are talking about a project which at least has three major functions, namely that of recording history with the help of eyewitness live individuals, to have these results then available for research and historians, and three, they are performing a very important therapeutic service to those people who have never been able to talk about their predicament in the past. Now, that particular institution, and it is an institution, it's an international institution, has been founded for now 12 years. And Ms. Silver, after visiting Israel in 1981, visiting a Holocaust conference as a reporter, tried to sell stories which heretofore were never recorded here in the United States, after she has come back and found out that indeed these stories were told for the first time and have not been recorded before. So that started her initiative to begin a project of this magnitude, which has developed over the years in a way which is singular in the world, and has done now, as I said before, has worked with 1,300 individuals who told their stories. Now, Ms. Silver is not only a reporter and writer, and she tried to sell these stories of the survivors here in the United States, but hasn't found any takers for reasons which we already have discussed here in this series, because people are not dreadfully interested in bearers of bad news. And that has something to do with that. And it's still a struggle, and therefore the project is underfunded. There is not enough money available for this project, and which performs such an important and vital function. Now, let me talk a little bit about Ms. Silver as a person. She got her master's degree in political science and is working on her PhD. Actually, she still has one course complete at Chicago University, which is not a bad thing. By the way, those who are sociologists here, and we've got about 39 should be here, Chicago is actually the home of sociology. I mean, that's the seat of sociology. And it's a terrific university, as some of you may know. And she has been still is, for 15 years, women's studies teacher at San Francisco State, and public radio reporter for 15 years. Now, then we have, of course, Mr. John, and he is a video producer, Mr. John Gray, and a writer and a playwright, and he has himself interviewed and video produced 600 sessions with survivors. He is in charge of taping survivor interviews for cable TV, a cable TV series. And he's a graduate from Columbia University and has earned a bachelor's degree. Now, it should be added that the Oral History Project in San Francisco has collected not only these 1,300 interviews, but their collection of survivors and testimonies of survivors is one of the finest in the world. And these particular products have, as we said before, a direct application for the professional use, which is available to all, and hopefully also will generate some books and publications. And that is something which I think is very important, because with this material are so many things which one can do apart from finding out what actually happened and using that as historical material. So many other things can be done with it. So they have performed a service, public service, which is singular, in order to shed light on the events of the Holocaust. Great pleasure and pride, I'm introducing to you Lani Silver and John Grant.
Okay. Hi. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes and then turn it over to Lani here. As Dr. Steiner said, I work for Lani at the Holocaust Oral History Project in San Francisco, videotaping the interviews that we do with Holocaust survivors. Thanks for inviting both of us here today. We appreciate that. Let me tell you very quickly a little bit about our work. The organization has been in existence for 12 years. In that time, we've done about 1,300 interviews with survivors and witnesses of the Holocaust. When Lani speaks, she'll tell you a little bit more specifically about our founding our organization and about how we work. What I want to say is that it's obvious to me that all of us around the world who are collecting and disseminating oral histories with Holocaust survivors are creating a body of work that I believe can be used to change the way human beings treat each other. Let me explain what I mean by that. The interviews that we do on videotape like this are overwhelming. I've seen this many times, but it's a shock for any person to sit down in front of a television monitor and listen to the lengthy, detailed story of any specific survivor, to hear perhaps of a normal childhood, then the nightmare of the Holocaust, and then the survivor's effort to make some kind of sense out of life afterwards. Each tape is very personal and very individual. It throws into dramatic relief the insanity of war and the self-destructiveness of racism. These videotapes have a remarkable and stunning impact on anybody who watches one of them. I believe that this kind of use that we and others are making of low-cost electronic recording devices can change forever the way history is recorded and evaluated. Now, intimate first-hand accounts of any individual's experiences can be preserved on the historical record forever. That means that from this point on, history is no longer just the story of kings and president generals. From now on, history is a much broader landscape of people and experiences. This is a very important point to understand. This new approach to history can really revolutionize the way we see ourselves on the planet, the way we treat each other, and the way we govern ourselves. The oral history process provides human beings with an opportunity to evolve to a higher set of principles for living than the principles of war and a higher consciousness about ourselves and our environment than we have practiced in the past. Let me talk for a minute about the oral history interview process itself. The Holocaust is still going on in the lives of most survivors. In doing interviews, we appreciate the great courage that it takes for most survivors to share these terrible stories. When we approach a survivor to do an interview, very often the survivor will tell us that he or she has never discussed their Holocaust experience with anyone before, not even with a spouse or with their children. And when survivors do finally decide to do an interview, they say they are doing it for two main reasons. The first reason is so that they can pass their story along to their families. And by doing it on tape, they can spit it out once and then they don't spit it out again. The second reason is so that they can get the facts down on the record for history. Unfortunately, human nature being what it is, most people won't really appreciate this archive of stories and lives that we and others are building up until all of these people have passed along. And then the rest of us and our ancestors will realize how much political power exists in a database like this and wish that it were larger. Unfortunately, we are already fighting this reactionary trend against the recording of Holocaust oral histories in the nonprofit funding community. We're fighting this battle right now. Let me tell you a quick story. Last year, one of the Bay Area's most famous Holocaust survivors died, Bill Graham, the rock promoter. Bill was on our board of directors at the Holocaust Oral History. Like most survivors, Bill was very uneasy about doing an oral history, and he continued to put it off. The last thing that he told Lani before he died was that he would do an oral history about his Holocaust experiences with us after his sister Esther had done one. Well, now Bill is gone, and he never told his story. In fact, a whole book about his life was published last year, filled with first persons told by him and others of Bill's life and his work, but almost nothing from the Holocaust was included in it because Bill didn't like to talk about that subject. Despite this fact, people who knew Bill closely say that the Holocaust was the key motivation for his behavior all his adult life. Well, most survivors are not celebrities, of course, but we and others like us are putting their voice on the map of history forever. Right now at the Holocaust Oral History Project, for example, we are collecting interviews with recent Russian immigrants to the Bay Area who are survivors of the Holocaust in Russia. There's rather little documentation of this period in existence right now, and with this program we're doing, we are making a unique addition to the historical record. We've done about 50 interviews in Russian so far. For me personally, I have met among the survivor community a lot of courageous people over the last few years. The survivors that I've met often seem wiser than the rest of us. Many of them are more humane, more compassionate, and more understanding than most human beings. I feel that they are among the sages of our century, and we have a lot to learn from them. Interacting with them has helped me to define and guide my own life personally. And I want to make one last point. The Holocaust is about people being divided and separated from their families, from their friends, and from themselves. Often, by doing an oral history, a survivor finds a way to share and to reconnect. This is a benefit to doing an oral history that a survivor might not anticipate in advance. So you encourage the survivors that you know who have not yet done so to come forward and put their first-hand accounts of the Holocaust on the record forever. And thank you for allowing me to talk today. I brought with me a sign-up sheet, so anybody who's interested in getting on our mailing list at the project can sign on these sheets. Maybe I'll circulate them around on the two different sides, and if we run out of space, you can write on the back. And got some copies of a newsletter, which you're welcome to take. And thank you very much. And now Lani Silver, our Executive Director, will talk.
Thank you, John. Well, I'm very honored to be here. This is a very famous program. We all know about this series here. I don't think I told John Steiner that partly I got into this work because of you, because your reputation was so strong, and I knew that he had done oral histories, and I'd been reading about some of his experience, and I knew that I would change through doing the oral histories, that I'd become a different person. So I'm very proud to be here, and Dr. Steiner has a wonderful reputation. I saw my other friend, Paul Benko, I don't see where he is now, and also about Dr. Steiner, I feel that he's one of the great ethicists. I mean, I actually don't know if that's a specialty of yours or if you consider yourself an ethicist, but I often say to myself, what should I do? What would John Steiner say I should do? And so then I calm down a little. It gives me a sense of perspective. And also one of the things I want to talk about is the privilege of sort of growing up a happy person, and that Holocaust work gives me some perspective because I think about my life, and I walk outside this building and it's so gorgeous, and one of the beautiful things in my life was going to Irv Newman summer camp all my life. So there was Philo, California in my mind from the youngest day. How old was I? I was a charter member. I think I was there the first year. The three areas I wanted to talk about were the project in general, the subject of the lessons of the Holocaust, and a couple of personal things. I grew up in San Francisco, went to summer camp in Philo, and was quite a conservative young person. And I remember being 19, and the question was asked, what's your opinion of the Vietnam War? And I don't tell this very often because it's embarrassing, but I wrote, I'm for the Vietnam War, I believe in the domino theory. And I went home and I said to my parents, what's the domino theory? And they told me, and so I remember that vividly. And at 20, Ms. Magazine writes about a click, a moment that you go, oh my God, you know, it makes sense. Something's different for you from that moment on. Sure enough, I had that click, and part of what I want to say today, which requires just the tiniest bit of pushing on my part, is when I get an honorarium, I feel particularly obligated to tell the full truth and to, as hard as it might be. So the bottom line here is I am proud to be a leftist and a feminist of 25 years. And that is shocking to some people. I don't know why. It just means a liberal. It means that I've gone to a lot of demonstrations. It means that I'm against racism. I am for women's rights. I am for disabled rights. But some people, it's like we're from Mars, you know, and they just sort of can't believe that we think like that. So I do think like that, and I almost feel as if this were a job fair, and I were saying to some of you, you know, if you're saying Standard Oil or a different corporation, I want to urge some of the people in this room to make it your occupation to be a political activist. That I believe, we'll talk about the lessons of the Holocaust, but I believe the strongest lesson is to not leave people alone, is to help people. Just your basic, when I was growing up, we always had the expression, you know, that people had principles and values and ideas. I don't hear that so much anymore. In some of my teaching, I'm sort of, one student said, well, the Holocaust was a good thing, the world is overpopulated. This was in my class in 1987, a person I knew, and I looked at that person, you know, where did they come from? How did this happen? So there are many answers to how this happened, how this student had that opinion. And part of being a scientist or a political activist is to understand that. What are the conditions that made this person think that way? I taught a Holocaust class once, and all we could say to each other the whole semester was, how did it happen? How did the Holocaust happen? And we couldn't really get beyond that question because every 5 minutes one of us would say that. So I want to, in a few minutes, turn that over to you and ask you that question. How did it happen? So I had that click, And I thought, and my friend said, you know, what's your life about? And I said, oh, you know, just getting married. And, oh, do you want a job? No, I don't. I just want it. And being married is fine and wonderful, and I am. But there's much more to a mind than that being my sole goal. And so, in a way, I woke up. I was conditioned like everyone else in the Sunset District of San Francisco. And then I really consider it quite a miracle that I got to head in this other direction. Then, by that point, I had gotten my best job of almost of my life working at Planned Parenthood, and that was a very exciting job. But then I started teaching. I got hired, a fluke really. There was somewhat of a political battle, and so they hired a liberal to teach women's studies, and that was me, and I loved it so much. And the courses I taught for 10 years were on violence against women, which were rape and battery and incest and murder, and that was very stimulating. At the same time, I was doing public radio work. So I went to Washington, I went to Jerusalem in 1981, and I sat in a chair like John here and me here, and I interviewed 50 survivors. And to each one of them, I'd say, "You've told your story, right?" And they'd say, "No." "Well, it's on record somewhere, right?" "No, never." Well, this was unbelievable. The only connection I had with the Holocaust was as a teenager, reading Mila 18 and Exodus and Leon Uris and Anne Frank, and talking to my parents, and that was pretty much it. And so I returned in 1981 to this topic in Jerusalem. And all these survivors not only said they'd never told their story formally, but very few of them had really told it to friends and family. And there was something so shocking about that I felt I felt like Scarlett O'Hara at Terra. She said, "Never again." Never, what did she say? "Never again. I'll eat this dirt," or whatever. "I'll do this forever." And and so I came home. And friends of my parents took me to Trader Vic's, and we were having a very nice dinner in Trader Vic's, and I was telling them that in the past year, I had tried to sell a story on the Holocaust conference to 100 magazines, and I got 100 rejections. That was strange to this moment that's probably ever happened to me, 100 out of 100. And so the man at the next table leaned over, a very beautiful family, and he said, "Is it true that you have all 100 stories and photographs, matching photographs?" "Yes." He said, "Well, I'm a publisher. Call me tomorrow." So I called him tomorrow, and I went into his office, and I knew that he was the president of WH. It was just such a fluke. So I advise all my friends, don't write query letters, go out to dinner and just talk about what you're working on, and someone will hopefully hear you. It's never worked since, but he paid for the first transcription of the first 100 interviews and the photographs. And he stayed with the book for 6 months. He announced that the Reagan economy had knocked the bottom out of coffee table books, and so there would be no book. By that time, 1983 happened, which was another Holocaust survivor conference. There were 5,000 survivors in Washington, D.C. And again, I went, but I brought 25 other public radio reporters, and we did 250 interviews at that point. So now our collection was 350 strong. Came home, I talked to the people at the Holocaust Center in San Francisco and said, I'd like to do this with you, or, I'd like to, and they said, well, do it on your own, but we'll cooperate with you, and so we did, and that was in 1984. In 1984, Evelyn Fielden and Sandra Ben-Dion, who are sitting right here, I think maybe it was a little later, came to the project. And we're trained as interviewers. We can hear a little bit from you what it's like to be an interviewer. Basically, some rude people say, well, aren't all the stories the same? This is sort of the worst thing people can say. every single story I have done is completely different. It's like everyone in this audience, in this group, is completely different and lives in some, every story is so valuable and so precious. And we train, don't cry during the interview. You're there as a professional. You're there to hear the story, and you so much want to cry. You're just bursting, and the bathroom break, and you run away, and it's such wonderful people. I really try not to make generalizations, but I can't describe how wonderful the survivors that we've talked to are, and you've met a lot of survivors here. So we have about 200 volunteers that act in different capacities. I hope you all will work with us and do different things. Of the 1,300 interviews, 800 are transcribed. We are indexing them. We have the largest collection of Russian oral histories outside of Russia. I'm so proud to be a part of this, and the bottom line for me is about the lessons of Holocaust. And I want to tell you one story, and then I want to ask you what the lessons of the Holocaust are for you. I took my nieces, I'm very close to my nieces, to a vegetarian restaurant, and the man sitting next to us was being very racist, and he was saying, I don't like this group of people, and I don't like that group of people. And Sarah and Brett, Sarah was 7 and Brett was 4. And Sarah leaned over and said, that man is being horrible. What are you going to do about it, Auntie Lani? And my heart started pounding. What do you say to a 7-year-old? I'm scared to do anything. I can't do anything. So I feel for me this work is like training. Every single day I feel like I'm practicing to not allow any racism to pass through my life. That anytime anyone says anything racist or anti-Semitic or anti-gay, I want to speak up, and it is hard. And so I looked at little Sarah and I said, well, what do you think I should do, Sarah? Do you think I should say something? She said, oh, definitely, but let me leave the restaurant first. So Sarah and Brett walk out, and their little faces come peering out over this window. Now I have no choice but to say anything. So I say, my just pounding, and I just say to the man, you've been very racist. You've said terrible things, and there are children here, and I really don't appreciate it. And he was so ashamed. His head hung down, and the woman he was with just kept nodding her head till it was like going to roll off. She just kept nodding her head, and she knew exactly what I meant. And it was a beautiful, for these children, for Sarah, who had heard about Holocaust work in a way all of her life, to understand. And now she's so cute. Now she's 11, and she always wants to hear, I've been in jail twice for civil disobedience. The nuclear movement is not my main work, and it was just like once or twice I felt I had to do something. So once I was one of 500 women and 500 men arrested in Livermore. I spent 2 weeks in jail. This was really ugly. And it did break the back of the anti-nuclear movement, and people knew it would. There are murderers that don't spend 2 weeks in jail. And so I had it was a beautiful time with the women, because we were howling to the moon, and we were all very hungry. We had bologna sandwiches twice a day, and that was it. But we had seminars and work. So cute Sarah always says, well, tell the story, Auntie Lani, when you went to jail. My poor mother, Irv's friend, has a bit of a heart attack, gets a little pale. And anyway, I'm not saying go to jail. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that the lessons of the Holocaust are that we all can make a tremendous difference. Each one in this room. Someone will yell at me that I'm naive. I can be the president. I think that you can enact legislation. I think that you can discover the cure for cancer. I think that you can make moral choices that will not allow Bosnia. The Kurds are endangered. Cambodia. Don't you just cry? The whales. I want to ask you what issues you're concerned with. And I want to ask you what we're going to do about it. I mean, there are people, I know, most people, they just too bad and don't ever do anything. We have a choice to not do anything or to do something and really make a difference. And I hope people have some examples of people that really made a difference. So when you study the Holocaust, you know that one thing is you're as a scholar, as a student, as a teacher, you're doing an analysis of things. Things aren't just that way for a reason. Things got to be a certain way because of a social structure. Now we're working with Japanese American liberators of Dachau. And I'm sort of a pacifist, and it's sort of strange that my project is honoring these liberators in a certain way. On the other hand, these men were used as cannon fodder. They joined the military, and they were sent on the front. The black unit and the Japanese American unit became the front line. There are many greater scholars than I am on this topic in this room, but were they not frontline people that were decimated, that were killed? Why? Because they were the front line, because they were not white? I mean, who's going to protect everyone's rights? And it's going to be the people in this room. So I sat next to a man on a plane recently who said, I hate gay people, and the first sentence out of my mouth was, I'm gay, and and I want us all to be all of those things, and it just breaks my heart when gay people are beaten up and hurt and not protected. The Sonoy Indians have a wonderful culture, and they have dreams, they honor their dreams, and if they're being chased by someone, their theory is that if you face them chasing you, you will be free. The truth will set you free. So the Sonoy Indian, so I had a dream a couple years ago, and I was being chased by the bad person, and it took all my courage and training for months to face that person, and I swear to God that person ran away, just scoot, scoot, scoot. So for me, Holocaust work is training myself. Isn't a burning question to you, what would I do if the Nazis came here? If they surrounded this room, and you knew that 10 people would be shot, but if we all tried to protect ourselves, most of us would be saved. But it takes practice every single day. Every day I wake up and say, good, now I get to be, I get to defend it. But it's practice, and it's very scary. My Bill Graham story was that I was in a terrible accident. Someone ran the stoplight, and I spun, and I thought I'd die, and my car collapsed. And I was crying at home. I wasn't walking, and I thought I would be not walking forever, and the phone rang, and it was, Bill Graham had never called me before. It was just the first phone call, and it was about, he said, I organize a Bitburg rally against Ronald Reagan. I'm sure you most know that Ronald Reagan went to visit a cemetery where there were 49 SS members buried. And Bill said, I'm so upset about this, I just can't believe that he's going to do that. And so I want to have a rally on Sunday. Would you help me organize it? And I went, oh my God, he must have the wrong phone number. I can't believe he's calling me. And so, sure, Bill, help. And so I jumped up and I started to do a dance. I was so happy that he called, and my mother was visiting. She said, so new, I thought you couldn't walk. So I'm dancing, I'm so happy. And then the following week, we went to the rally. And it was the most powerful thing I've ever seen. There were 50 speakers, and each one, were you two there? Each one said, don't go to Bitburg. The head of the Council of Churches said, Ronald Reagan, you're an evil man to want to go. And I think his job came in jeopardy for saying that. The head of the Republican Party said, don't go to Bitburg. So Bill went ahead with it. He had the rally. He placed a full-page ad. And I was driving across the bridge. I lived in Sebastopol, and I heard on the news that Bill Graham's, which was like a museum, had been burnt to the ground by someone wearing an SS uniform. Now, the uniform was probably not true, but certainly his business was burnt to the ground, and it was burnt to the ground who we're positive someone thought was a Jew. I mean, it was sort of like speaking out against Nazis. There was a phrase about Jews, and it was tragic, and this man was shattered. And so we all have to protect the next Bill Graham, or protect you when you organize a rally. We have to all be together and say we're not, we're all in this together. I do not face a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism, but one of my first jobs, I was fired for being Jewish. The registrar said, don't go to I was assisting her, and she said, oh, don't go to that party, it's the Christmas party. There's just dirty Jews there. And it was one of the first decisions I ever had to make like this, and I thought, and I said to her, well, in the teeniest voice, I said, well, I'm Jewish. And she jumped up and came back in the room 5 minutes later and said, we don't need your services anymore. So the first question I'd like to ask you, I mean, I still have more I want to talk about, but I want to ask if who in this room has been a victim of destruction, that you would be willing to tell us what happened to you. Jean.
I call myself a 10% Jew. I was part of the quota system to go through Cornell University, through the veterinary school at Cornell University. And this was all got kicked by the wayside by 1964. Because school and the Civil Rights Act came in. But prior to that, there was a numerous clauses. And not only that, there were 2 professional veterinary fraternities on the campus. And they were for white Christian men only, in a state school on the Cornell campus.
Who else can tell us some of what happened to them?
This just sort of, I just sort of realized this, but when I was in junior high, and I think, and these things happened so many times even before that, but just the one that the earliest one that I can recollect that it was just so, was when one of my teachers was absent, and we had a substitute, a white male, really tall guy. That's all I remember. I can't remember his face. But I remember the class, it was seventh grade, and the class was acting really loud, really, really loud. Most of them were my friends in the class. Most of them spoke Spanish, but I can't say where specifically they were from. There was a lot of Asian kids in there too. And I remember the teacher got so mad because he couldn't control this class. And I think he told us to shut up and to stop it and to sit down, and none of us would do it. And you just play games with the substitute anyway. And for him saying, you guys are nothing but a bunch of stupid Mexicans that won't listen or understand. What language do I have to speak to you in? You're like, by the time you're in 7th grade, you need to know English. And it didn't do anything to us. But I remember when the teacher came back the next day, she got together with 3 others that just rallied up against this guy. And I think fired from ever, he couldn't substitute anymore. And I just remembered that the other day. But that was the first. And I'm not Mexican.
It's a terrible story. And imagine hearing something like that frequently. That's terrible. Thanks. That's exactly what we're talking about.
It's sometimes not easy to forget the things that happen to you but I've had discussions with relatives and friends who say, well, what happened then was then. Something like that would never happen today. But just this year, 1993, the first week of the new year, somebody came to work and was going up and down the halls singing, Happy Jew Year to you, Happy Jew Year to you. And when he came into the office and I'm standing there looking at him, he said, well, I think I better stop. There may be some Jews around. And I said, yes, I'm one. And he just looked at me and smiled and walked out. Never a word of apology or anything. Not an excuse me or...
We've gotten about 7 letters this year that say bad things about Jewish people and Japanese Americans, which is just amazing. Yes, Dad.
Yes, I happen to be a very good friend of ours. And Gene and I have discussions about the Holocaust program. And I'm totally in disagreement with things that the people are doing. And I'd like to tell you about discrimination in a once removed, because I think there is where the problem is, not in documenting survivors of the Holocaust. I was flying in Germany at the time. They were burning Jews in ovens. We wanted to bomb the tracks that went into Buchwald. The President of the United States denied us the right to do it. You see, what you have to understand about people killing people is that people never kill people. Governments kill people. And if you want to take it just a little bit closer to home, you have the Twin Tower situation where a Lebanese living in the United States, illegally, known by the CIA to belong to a terrorist organization, is the man that, the van that carries the bomb. And the religious leader who he visits when he prays is in the United States for 3 years, illegal, known to head a terrorist organization, and he still sits in New Jersey. We don't kill each other. Governments kill each other. And as long as we elect governments that are not us, we're going to kill each other.
Right.
You won't even know why you're being killed. I really don't understand the point, the intellectual point of what it is that your people are doing. I do know how people died. I do know how soldiers died.
Other comments, other people that have been discriminated against? Is there anything anyone can tell us or share? Okay, so
There's a couple people over there.
I would like to comment on his comment. Isn't that omitting personal responsibility, though? I mean, unless I'm not totally understanding what you said, that is a possibility. However, it seems like the government isn't the only source. What about personal responsibility? What about saying, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. No, I'm not going to do this.
great point.
Can I answer that, please? What? They're pulling the American troops out of Samoa. It's going to be turned over to the United Nations. The United Nations are going to do a disastrous job, and you're going to have a Holocaust in that country in the next 3 weeks. And I would like to know what you've done about it in the last 2 weeks.
Someone else, you had a comment?
How do you know that the United Nations is going to do a terrible job on this? How do you know all these things in advance? I mean,
Speak to the Samoans.
what's Samoan? Well, there's a difference between a Samoan and a Somali.
If you want to make a case, if you want to make a case about Somalia or Samoa, you now can change the issue. The fact of the matter is that they don't want the United Nations troops there. The United Nations troops there have not had a good record. At the present time, you're beginning to have outbreaks that you had prior to time that the Americans were moved in, but we're bringing the troops out.
I'm sorry, we have so much to cover by 5:20.
Suggest we move on with your program and not get into these kind of...
Right. The next question I wanted to ask...
This gentleman has a comment he'd like to make.
Oh, I had a little small amount of experience with discrimination. I was the only German Jewish kid in a German town and German high school. So a little bit, just during the time of when the Nazis were gaining power and the whole thing. And Christian, I asked, has any one of the survivors ever gone back and confront people that did all this thing like I have? And I just barely made it. You know, I paid my dues naturally, but I made it out eventually. But my mother and two sisters and two cousins in that small northern Germany were not so lucky. So in fact, a couple of years ago, the 50th anniversary, I've written some strong letters, and so they erected a monument, and there is my daughter-in-law told a story about it, and she's a bright Protestant girl, and forever the optimist, because it appeared in the Dallas News, and with me, and also there's another story, and I live in Napa. I've been living there for 30 years, and she also writes about me and tell her, don't you have subject and writing about me. Anyway, a Christmas story, that's named, and that was my attempt to leave Germany in 1932, and finally made it. And only to be deported from Copenhagen with the help of a fucking rabbi. Now that's Old English, pardon my Old English, but I can name a name.
Well, I'm sure...
Rabbi...
Sorry.
Dr. Winter of Oberrabbiner Dr. Winter of Copenhagen.
I'm sure people that you've talked about the Nuremberg laws and that the laws. I mean, it would be you're sitting there, Carol, and then someone says, women can't go to school, or you can't own a business, or you can't go to medical school, or you're going to lose your job. And so many people that lived there, every right was taken away from them.
If I could say something to directly answer your question, I thought you asked if there were many survivors who'd gone back or not. Did you ask that question? Was that what you said? In doing interview, give you a little anecdotal information on that. I'd say there's quite a variety of feelings on that. Mostly survivors say no way. You know, survivors who emigrated from Germany or Poland say they would never go back. In recent years, a few of them have gone back. In some cases, individual towns will put together some kind of ceremonial program in which they invite survivors back to ease their conscience, mostly, I think. And the information that I anecdotally from survivors is that basically they get some kind of ceremonial brush-off, to put it bluntly, where they're invited in for a few days, get a few meals and some programs, and it's really they feel it's a public relations stunt by the local town, although there's some genuine attempt by the Germans to try to rectify is the wrong word, to try to make amends, however that could possibly be done. But I I think that survivors who've gone through it have generally found it to be sort of a public relations thing. Unfortunately, in Germany today, my understanding is there's very little Holocaust education that goes on in the schools right now. I have a friend who went through German schools and German high school, and he said it's on the curriculum, but when you actually get to that point in the schools, for some reason, they actually never quite get to that part of the curriculum. So kids graduate from high school in Germany with very little Holocaust in. So, you know, it's a real problem in Germany. And also many survivors say that they feel, honestly, they can't hold the children responsible for their parents' actions as Nazis, but there's still this terrible problem of feeling that there is really nothing substantively being done in Germany to address the problem. So that's kind of my anecdotal experience of how it stands.
That vary in degrees. You know, in my case, you know, I had if anyone ever tells you, you know, or one of the pseudo-historians that the Holocaust never happened, all they have to do is go to a place like my old hometown. You know, they went. The mayor of the hometown just completely broke down, and they're now great friends of ours. In fact, they're going to visit us again next week.
You have to see The Nasty Girl. How many people have seen that? She was a college student, wasn't she? Is she just a college student and high school student researching what happened to her town in the Holocaust, and now she's. It's just a beautiful story. The next question I'd like to ask is, what are the lessons of the Holocaust? And I was going to have people write it down, but maybe we can just brainstorm. What are some of the lessons of the Holocaust that come to your mind? After you've studied this now for half a semester, that you understand much more about the Holocaust, what are the lessons to you? What have you learned about life from the Holocaust?
Well, I'd like to say that what I've learned would be that this could happen again. That human nature is such that none of us immune to something like this happening again, and we need to be alert to that fact and watch for it.
Happening in the United States, in San Francisco, where could it happen? Where do you think of it happening? I mean, it's happening right now, I mean,
Right.
on a Civil War level.
Any place where human rights and freedoms are being jeopardized, any place where people are being maneuvered against their will, and it can be very subtle. This could be subtle. It could start very subtly and then come across, because I hate to use the word sheep, but I think sometimes we tend to follow. And once we get on a path, we're not really cognizant of what really is happening.
Right.
And it's almost, do I want to say brainwashing or what, you know? But I think sometimes that this is what, and we have to be alert. We have to be alert to this, because it could happen, something like this could happen again. It's happened even prior to the Holocaust, Germany in World War II. I mean, there's history. It goes way, way back. There has been periods of time where people have been purged. This happened in Russia, and it's happened. So we can't ever say that this would never happen again.
Right. Well put. Other people, other ideas about the lessons? Gene?
Well, I've heard two bits of misinformation that have been presented to this group in a fairly authoritarian manner that I'd like to correct. Number one, in World War II, black soldiers were not alike. Black pilots who won their wings were not allowed to fly. They were not cannon fodder alike. Up until the Battle of the Bulge,
They were, Gene.
And General Patton.
I'm sorry, they were. I mean, anyway.
This is what is in the media right now.
But what you just said, even if it was later in the war, it's still correct that they were misused.
Japanese are different. They volunteered for it, but they were good Americans. And they did. They got more medals than anybody else. The other bit of information, and I'd like to hear from two of the faculty on this, is on Holocaust education in Germany. It's been my impression in the study here that certainly compared to us, Germany is doing a very, very good job. I'd like to hear from Dr. Beard or from Dr. Steiner on that subject.
I was planning on saying something at some point, but I'm not sure whether this is the appropriate point. Well, let me just, in a nutshell, with all due respect, Mr. Grant, I think your information is faulty.
Okay.
About Holocaust education in Germany. It's extremely important, certainly not to whitewash perpetrators and not to whitewash Germans who are ignoring their historical responsibility. And so I don't want to be understood as if I'm trying to possess nothing is further from my mind. But by the same token, and I'd say this is one of the lessons of Holocaust studies too.
Right.
It's very dangerous to, how should I put it? It's dangerous to make generalizations without first having checked your facts.
Okay, I appreciate any information you can give me.
There's tons of evidence of the centrality of Holocaust studies in recent years. It wasn't so earlier, but starting in a major way, showing of the Holocaust miniseries on German television in 1979, I believe it was, things changed in a major way. So that now, I think typically, although this isn't standard nationwide because each state has its own individual education system, typically in the 12th grade, there is a block in history courses that is devoted to the Holocaust. My son went to the 11th grade in a German Gesamtschule, comprehensive school, and then he missed it. No, what is this now? Okay, he went to the 11th grade in the German Gesamtschule, and then he came back a year later after having graduated from American high school and did the 12th and 13th grade in a different school, a gymnasium. The two schools didn't offer the Holocaust block at the same time, so he didn't get it in the 11th grade because it was going to be offered in that school in the 12th. When he came to the other school in the 12th, it had already been offered in the 11th. But what he did tell me, and I interviewed him about this at some length, was that in the course and in their history course, they made frequent reference to the Nazi period and to the Holocaust, and the students already knew what was going on. The basic knowledge was there, and they were now reading literary works that treated Holocaust topics and talking about that. Now that's in the schools themselves. Furthermore, the media do a far more assiduous job of talking about genocide and the Holocaust and other genocides and any other national media that I am aware of. You can't go for a week or two without one of the major news media, both print media and TV media, some major presentation being made about it. And so it's being looked at from lots of different aspects. Now, obviously, one can never do enough. How can you possibly do enough to overcome or to balance out the atrocities that were committed? It's impossible. But I would just have to, or I would deny the general accuracy of the report that you.
But I think
in certain cases it may well be so.
And here in America, in the Bay Area, I think Holocaust education is
I appreciate
inadequate.
your information and thanks for clarifying that for me. I was talking about a friend of mine, anecdotally, who's my age. He's in his mid-40s, so he went to high school in the 60s, and he told me that at that time, although it was officially on the curriculum, he and virtually all the people that he knew did not get any real specific detailed Holocaust education, and I'm glad that you've updated my information on that, and I appreciate your clarifying that. And I wasn't referring to the German TV and news media. I know that they've done quite a bit of work on that in recent years, but I appreciate your information. Thanks.
I also spent 11th grade in a German housing, and I can tell you that even in my English class, we were reading The Wave. Have you heard of that? That's dealing with basically the same topic, and that was an English class. It was prevalent in just about every class. Well, maybe like PE maybe not, but just about every class that it was possible dealing with it. As a planned thing, it would always come up, and I know that there were always different feelings about what happened and what ought to be done now, and I know that even now, a lot of the official policies are to let people seeking asylum into the country, and that's specifically because of the Holocaust, you know, and at least to my knowledge.
Yes.
And it's also kind of difficult. I can remember a time, I must have been like 7 or 8, and I was at a YMCA camp, and I can remember people laughing at me because of my German name, calling me a Nazi, and I don't, that's not forgivable.
Right,
You know.
it's terrible. What other lessons come to people's minds? The lessons of the Holocaust, what are they?
What you said earlier, I second, and that is, don't let them pass by that offends you or your fellow human being without speaking up about it in dissent. Because I think a piece of us dies each time we let one of those things go by.
Anyone have an example of speaking up for someone?
Or it's an example of my failing to speak up for someone. A few months ago, I took a radiator that needed to be repaired to a repair shop late on a Friday afternoon. Actually, no, I went to pick it up, and the shop was closing down. The guys were all just sitting around drinking beer, and they offered me a beer, and I accepted it, and we were shooting a bowl about radiators. And the guy says, I hear we're getting a jigaboo coming back working with us.
Oh.
And the foreman said, what do you mean jigaboo? The guy's from Ethiopia. And the guy said, I don't care where he's from, he's a nigger. And I just looked at him and my jaw dropped. And I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. I was so shocked. He said, well, look, I'm sorry, but I'm prejudiced. I was raised that way. I was drinking this guy's beer, you know, and I didn't know what to do. And so I just sort of looked at him and nodded and, you know, thanked them for the radiator and left. And I thought later, well, you know, what a good thing to have said would be, hey, look, I'm prejudiced too. I think everybody's prejudiced. I don't think you can grow up without being prejudiced in one way or another, but that doesn't mean you have to be mean.
That's a good thing to say. What else could someone have said? It would scare me too.
Throw the beer in his face.
I like that idea. She said, throw the beer in his face. What other, has anyone else had to speak up for someone or not speak up?
I had my son in Colombia, South America, and my grandparents see anyone that's not white as black. And I married in their interpretation of black woman. And I had my baby, and I called them immediately because I love her for lots of other reasons. And I said, I have my baby. And her first question was, what color is his hair? And I said, he has black hair and dark skin, and he's so beautiful. And she got the point, real clear in that idea. And she said, oh, I'm so healthy and beautiful. And I had conversations about it, more particularly with it after. But it was hard to say that because I know what she was asking, and not to say he's light or he's anything else, but the time he was dark. But to respond to her so that she'd get the point. Get the point that he's beautiful and healthy.
And don't you feel like a lot of pride when we stand up against it? Don't you just feel really good? And when I don't speak up, like saying, you know, right then, it sort of haunts me, or I wish I had it to relive again.
I was with someone recently who was generalizing about many groups of people. And this woman, I don't think that, you know, her intentions were to be racist, but I heard a lot of racism in what she was saying, real subtly, like, all these people are this way, and they, you know, all the things she was saying weren't necessarily mean, but I was really uncomfortable with these generalizations she was making, and I was struggling, going, you know, what? This is my friend, you know, I don't want to offend her, but how should I say something to her that will help us both, you know, come to some dialogue about this, because it's really uncomfortable for me seeing this kind of attitude. I mean, I think that's where it starts, is you start making generalizations about someone, and they can turn, you know, they could be good to start off with, but they're generalizations that necessarily aren't true, you know. So I just told her, I said, you know, I'm really uncomfortable that you're generalizing about people. It seems to me that you know, some of the things you're saying might be true, but it's just not true of all people. And generalizing like that can be so dangerous because that's how such horrifying things have happened, like the Holocaust, where people started, you know, just generalizing about a group of people and then killing them. I mean, that was the end result, was that people were murdered for that. So, you know, I don't know, it seems to me like this class is a good excuse to talk about, gosh, I'm taking this Holocaust class, and ever since then I'm really uncomfortable with people making these generalizations about people, or I'm really aware of the racism that exists, you know, in our country or in people's attitudes, and just starting a dialogue. I mean, I think it's really important for people to talk about this and to feel safe enough to go, oh, you know, I mean, her reaction wasn't offensive at all. She said, you know, it's interesting, I never really thought of it that way. I didn't realize I was generalizing about people, and I can really see where that would be dangerous to start doing.
That's great. Evelyn, you shared something so intimate with me once about some of the reaction you got to working with the project. Is that, do you remember what you just said some people were sort of like, why do you do that?
Yeah, in fact, my own family asked me why I'm doing this kind of work, interviewing the Holocaust survivors. And I told them I feel I have to do it. After all, I'm a survivor myself. And I've heard it over and over again. Isn't it about time we stop it? And I just can't believe that people still are saying that. After things, what's going on now, I mean, all over the world. And as I say, even my own family at times got very angry. Over to Austria a few years ago, and my friend asked me what, she's an Austrian and non-Jewish, and what am I doing, what I'm doing with my time. I say I'm surviving Holocaust survivors. I work very closely with the Oral History Project. She says, you really do, don't they in America think it's about time that it stopped by now? Well, nothing else to add anything to that.
People say that all the time. 30 years ago, I have one sweater that is about 50 years old. I mean, it was just, you know, yesterday. There are many swastikas around Europe. That's very disturbing. Any other concluding thought? Do we close at 5:20? 5:30.
5:40.
Oh, good. Okay.
When you said there's many swastikas around Europe,
Yes.
you really need, part of the what I feel needs to be about what the Holocaust is, to demystify some of the power that it has in it. And the swastika is a powerful symbol, but it belongs to all peoples. It came out of the goddess traditions, it came out of the Native American traditions, and we have to return those symbols to the people and take that fear out of it and understand the symbol and the inherent power in it.
Well, it's a good point, except I can't do that about the swastika. I mean, I agree with you about a lot of things.
That's a meditation symbol in India. And no, we can't take it away from them. We have to return those symbols because they're symbols of power. That the cross is a basic symbol that goes throughout many cultures. And one of the things that happened in Germany is it got converted, and the feet go the opposite direction. So instead of evolving the mind, it sends the mind backwards.
Actually, that's what I was just going to ask you, is what did go wrong in Germany? How could it have happened? Can some people shed some insight to us? How could this have happened? A third of the Jews of the world were murdered. 2/3 of the Jews of Europe were murdered. Another 3 million people were murdered. How could it have happened? Jean.
Okay. You can find the answer on one page of Mein Kampf. It's around one page, about 129 of the 1939 unabridged edition. It took me 60 years to find it. Hitler was no more, some of this is my personal opinion. I'm certain you'll see the facts. versus personal opinion. I don't believe that Hitler was any more anti-Semitic than other people in the around him. But what he was a racial hygienist. He has very, very strong ideas about which race should do this, that, the other thing, who was the best, namely the Nordics. He makes this statement on one page about what a leader has to do to get the people behind him. Very, very clear. A leader, you cannot get the people behind you if you show that there are multiple enemies, which he believed he was against multiple races. He was very much concerned about the Slavs and the Balkans in Austria and the loss of the Germans, the German heritage in Austria. This, he was very much concerned. In order to go behind you, you must make them believe that there is one enemy. You'll take care of all the rest. But you set up the system by making sure that there was one enemy. It's right there. He lays the whole plan out, and he doesn't use the word Jew in that part of the book. Once. But he lays the whole plan right
Definitely.
out. That's it.
Paul Benko, where's Paul? Am I putting you on the spot? Would you please tell me how this happened? Would you help us?
Well, I don't think there's a single event, but there is a long tradition in Germany of being very civil, very obedient. And this audience has heard this before. This lack of disobedience led to the acceptance, and this is a slope with a very slippery slide that begins very gently and then becomes very steep. If you want a dramatic demonstration, the play good comes to mind.
Right.
The beginning may even be well-intentioned, but you have difficulties, and well-educated people who are willing to accept a solution without asking consequences. And that's not a difficult thing to do when somebody does it very often, and they were masters of that. There was also a tradition of never disagreeing vocally with the government, and when those clashes did occur, it was already manipulated to the point where we were going to win.
Absolutely.
By the time the Reichstag fire occurred, it was too late.
I'm sorry.
The question everyone must ask themselves is when is it not too late? When is it not too late?
I would just like to insert one word that is as a choice. To make the right choice for the wrong. We have choice.
Right. We have choices. Do you all know the Milgram study? And then I want to call on you. You all know, does everyone know the Milgram study? I don't know how to describe it quickly, but people were pretend hooked up to electric shock, and you were the subject, and the question, you'd ask the subject a question, and if they answered it wrong, you'd give them a small electric shock. And you thought it was a real thing, and they'd scream from the next room, they'd just yell. And Milgram wanted to know how many people would go all the way. There were how many buttons? 20 buttons, and the last button was XXX danger. And he thought no one, he just didn't believe anyone would go XXX. And I feel very bad that I can't remember, but it was 60% went all the way to the danger point. And it was I was going to say it was 60, but...
Between 60 and 70%.
Oh, my God.
66, 65, somewhere.
Oh, my God. And in
67.
Germany, it was 10% higher, but 60% here, or 8% here? So no one, and they've repeated this study, and no one would believe they'd go XXX, or that I would push X, because you'd say, I would never do that. but you did.
Well, real quick, wasn't that, how many of those people were women? Were they all men? Because I'm under the impression that they were all men, and I'd like to know what the percentage would be.
It was mixed. Yes.
Yeah. There were more men than women, but there were women represented as nurses, teachers, waitresses. You took from a whole gamut of roles in society.
This might be simplifying everything, but I feel that if we could just focus a lot of our energy and attention on child abuse and raising our children with that, and fostering good, healthy self-esteem in our children and teaching them how to respect each other, we would wipe away so many of our problems, because our children, we would all grow up respecting each other, you know? And I feel like there's not enough, we have with child care and with the schools, there's not enough attention given to the reality that children, if they are treated badly, our problems are only going to escalate. They're not going to be solved, because we don't have the mentality that we can do something, that we're worth something, and that we can help, that we can do something.
Great idea. Yes. How do we do that? How do we do that?
Question authority.
Yes, that sounds good. What do you feel like when you question authority? It's scary. It's scary.
The thing you just said about the Milgram study brought up a response from me to the question we asked a little while ago, which was, what are some of the most important lessons that we've learned from this? I took this course 2 years ago, and I feel that the most important thing I learned is that we are all potential Nazis. And the people who shout the loudest that I would never do that are the people we need to be afraid of. Because we need to confront ourselves. And the people who say, I would never do that, do not know themselves, and I think they are the dangerous people.
That's a great, I share that fear.
Yeah, wasn't it the main reason why people resorted to Nazism back in the 30s? Wasn't it mainly for their own self-protection that they did that?
Well, I think when economies...
They were not in danger.
Sure they were.
They were starving, some.
I think when economies get bad, there's scapegoating and blaming. And the economy's bad, there is anti-Semitism in countries where there are no Jewish people. There's that just... So I think when the economy gets bad, people get blamed. And what I'm saying is we all have to stick together and not let and maybe someone would share an example of when they felt like they were almost had some of those Nazi qualities, What can turn that around? You two.
Well, since you're trying to switch the subject here, and this really relates back to what I said, I just wanted to add on something further. In relation to the Milgram experiment, the people who do shout the loudest, I would never do that, and then do it. The interviews that took place afterwards, the majority of the people went all the way over a lethal dose, a supposed lethal dose. They asked me, why did you say I had no choice? And there was never any time, any threats, physical pressure, not even any physical contact.
Well, it's what you're saying, question authority. There was tremendous intimidation. There was the scholar.
They're in the lab jackets and really watching them and standing over them and looking down on them, but they weren't actually physically
it wasn't like a physical
It's just one man in a white coat.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how intimidating.
That's all of us, but how much?
My point I'm trying to make is that those people did have a choice. There were no physical restraints put on them. They did have a choice of what to do. And if it's a question, logically, when you put it in your mind, it's a question of a man in a white coat standing over you for somebody's life. Logically, you would say somebody's life, but when you're in that situation, it's important to recognize then that you have a choice.
So what do you think went wrong with those 68%?
They gave in to that intimidation. I mean, a lot of people do that. I'm not putting myself above
The white coat.
And science. They were doing it for science, too, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's another pressure that's put upon it. I mean, the same excuses were placed in the Holocaust too. The same type of scapegoat was placed upon that role. And so it's easy to fall into that, because if you say, well, I don't have a choice, you're not to blame.
Right. Milai.
Several ideas have come up. Question authority, take responsibility for one's own actions, and exert your choice. And I just kind of wanted to tell everybody that no nation has the right to draft you and go tell you to kill somebody because they want you to. I hope everyone can keep that in mind.
But there's a price you pay. I mean, I'm telling you all, you know, just question authority, but then when you do and you don't look a certain way or dress a certain way or join the army, there is a price to pay. And you might well be in jail, and you might well be ostracized from the community. And we all just have to get strength from each other to stand up to that. The woman behind you.
I just wanted to say that when I was younger, my parents always raised me with the attitude of respecting your elders, and if they were older than you,
Good point.
you know, and they sky is purple, then you would just agree because they were older, they knew more, and that's just how it was supposed to be. And I had always gone through my life like that. And I'm only 21 right now. I haven't, you know, lived that long. I was flying home for Thanksgiving break last Thanksgiving, and I just remember it was like a bit of, there were these two businessmen, the, you know, typical unsweaty businessmen that were sitting together talking, and in front of us there were these two kids, and they were flying alone, and one was black, it was this little black boy, and then this little white girl, and they were sitting and they were talking and playing together, and they were flying alone, and these men were sitting behind me, and they started talking about these children, about how the little black boy hadn't learned his parents obviously hadn't taught him his place, that he shouldn't be playing with this little girl because he's just going to corrupt her. And they were just going on, and I just sat there and didn't say anything and held my tongue, and then they started telling Polak jokes, and I'm Polish, and I just sat there and held my tongue and didn't say anything. And then they started talking about one of the stewardesses very degradingly. And I'm thinking, he's talking about Polacks, he's talking about women, I'm Polish, I'm a woman. I just stood up and I turned around and I said, excuse me, but I realize you're older than me, and I am probably in your eyes just a child, which would probably make me very impressionable, so I would appreciate you not speaking the way that you're speaking. And he looked at me and told me to shut up, little girl, and sit down and learn my place. And I did, because I just didn't, and when I sat down, this guy that was sitting next to me looked at me and he said, your face is so red, why don't you just tell him to go fuck himself or something? And you know what, I would, but I just was raised not to, and I wanted to so bad, and I got home and I called my dad and I said, you'll never guess what happened to me, listen what happened to me. And he said, well, you should have told him what to do, and I realized it, and then just kind of kicked myself. But
You're to yourself. Didn't you tell him what to do? I mean, you did. You said all that.
just threw it back in my face. And
So what? You know. But you said all of that. I mean, you're telling this story, but you said everything you needed to say. I want everyone to give you an applause. I mean, I think it's great.
I'd like to say how utterly disappointed I am in this class today, because I had an opportunity to learn some things overall about the nature of the interview process. And I would have wanted to hear more from the interviewers, some things we could learn about how the stories have been told. And to talk about anecdotes and how we feel doesn't belong in this class. And I really have some questions for the interviewers. For example, did female survivors respond better to females? Things like that. And that's what I thought this class was going to be about.
Yeah, we still have more time, and I want to hear from Sandra and Evelyn. We have 15 more minutes.
I'd like to respond to the gentleman. I don't say I disagree, because one way that people learn is by interacting and talking about what they're learning. So the interviewers have been talking, and we are all learning by responding
and also hearing the feelings and ideas of other people, so I would have to strongly disagree with you. Need to hear from both, because there have been some valuable things said by people in this audience.
I have a recommendation for you. There's a political science class, course 302. It's called Social Science Research Method. And if you'd like to learn a lot more about the whole interviewing process and research methods and how they work and how the interviewers affect the interviewing process, then I would strongly recommend that. I think this
I think your request is very legitimate. We learn a lot through interviewing. We've been doing it 12 years. The bottom line of what I learn is about the lessons of the Holocaust, that has become what is the most compelling to me, and that the people that work in the project seem to be stronger for it. Sandra and Evelyn and John, maybe you want to talk some about what you've learned, some of what goes on in the interviewing process.
Well, I'm a shy person and I'm not prepared. So it's hard for me to just all of a sudden.
No problem. Evelyn.
Well, I feel I'm almost a different person. In the beginning, I thought I knew just about everything about the Holocaust. Oh, yes, I was there, but I knew absolutely nothing. Nothing. I interviewed her the other day. She was only in the States. She's only been in the States now for 14 years. She got caught up. She lived in Czechoslovakia, then in Romania. And she was in Romania when the Russians took over. So she's only been here about 14 years. And I came to her house and she says, do you know, you're the only person, the very first person who's across from me at the table. We sat at the kitchen table, looks into my eyes and asked me questions. In all those 14 years, nobody ever asked anything. Yes, where are you from? You have an accent and all that. But nobody really took the time and asked her what her life was like all these years. I mean, not only did she suffer under the Nazis, but under the communists too. So it was twofold with her. And we ended up with an interview which took 4 hours. And that was the very first time, and she was now 75 years old, and her children didn't know anything about her life previous to communism. She just never talked about her life under the Nazis. So to me, this is so gratifying. It's the only word which comes to my mind. I feel that I just help people. I mean, I contribute a little bit, and that's so much. I can tell you that. There's much more to tell, but
May I ask you a couple questions, Evelyn?
Yes.
Do you think it's a traumatic process for the survivors to go through the interview?
For some it is, and for some it isn't. I still have 3 people on my list who say, I will let you know. I will call you. I know they won't call me. 3 months or so, I get on the phone. I say, how about it? Shall we just get together for a cup of coffee? And I make it very informal. Oh, I don't know. I don't think I'm ready for it. Yes, maybe next month. So, I mean, there are still a lot of people who shy away from an interview. They're scared.
Do you ever keep in touch with people after the interview?
Oh, yes.
Do you ever have conversations with them about expectations that they had about the interview before the interview, and then their experience about it after the interview?
With some of them said, oh, I'm so glad I did it. I had 3 copies made of the tape, and now my 3 sons can look at the tape. I cannot bring myself to tell them. So but they all, everybody's different, you know. They who feel quite non-committal. I mean, they just are happy they have the tape. But there was one person. I say, have you shown the tape to your daughter? Not yet. And she's close to 90.
I would like to say that it seems to me that at some place it has to be very painful for everybody to speak of these terrible things and their fear and their humility and their horrible losses. I think obviously some people have dealt with it so that on the surface they can speak. fairly easily. In others, it's still very deeply emotional. But I can't believe that a human being can go through those experiences and not feel a pain about it.
We've had 3 or 4 psychiatrists and psychologists come and consult with us because I was afraid that we were hurting people. You know, how do we know that it's a good process? John always says he feels that they look 10 years younger when they leave the room, and they come back and they're lighter and happier.
No, they look 50 years older when they leave the room, but 10 years younger 6 months later when I see them again.
That's right. So the psychiatrists, you know, sort of collectively said, oh, don't be silly, cathartic, this is a good thing. And I think this is what we're talking about, that if you speak your mind, you're going to feel better, in my opinion.
I just have a comment. His hand's been up for the last 15 minutes and no one's called him. I think it's pretty rude.
Well, I wanted to have other people who hadn't spoken.
Everyone's just putting their hand up in an instant second they're being called on, and he's had his hand up for 15 minutes.
Well, I was trying to get everyone to speak, let everyone have a chance, but yes.
May I? First of all, I think what you have here is, in practice, what actually happens in discrimination. What I said before is not in agreement with them. So I was almost creeping out of my skin before I'd get recognized. Now, she did recognize other people more than once. She didn't recognize me because what I had wasn't in agreement. But we're past that. You asked the question, how could it happen? I'd like to tell you how it happened. In 1917, you had the Bolshevik Revolution. Communism became a bigger threat to the United States, England, and France than Hitler. The United States financed, the United States, England, and France financed Hitler because the plan was that Hitler would move to the east, and he double-crossed them. Hitler moved to the west, and we were losing the war. And finally, because Stalin's a real fox, he got the United States, France, and England to give him the necessary gunpowder so that he could open up a second front. He opened up the second front, and Germany was defeated. And what you got left now was a more dangerous communism than you had initially, and you had 40 years more of Holocaust in Russia. Now, somebody has to begin to understand how these things happen. You can't take a bunch of kids in a class and talk in terms of bleeding hearts and taking testimony when the pattern that I'm telling you about now is being repeated now 20 different places in the world. And it all has to do with the same story. Money, power, land, munitions. And that's what has to be addressed. I don't think, believe me, you can do this thing. And maybe somebody will get some good out of it. But it's not going to keep one person from dying in a mountain, in a desert, on an ocean. The same thing has been happening for almost centuries, and nobody watched. So if you look at today's situation, if you look at the policy of the United States today, which is the only superpower, you'll begin to understand the chess game, and you will find where the next Jew or the next black or the next green or the next yellow is going to go into an oven.
Hi. I was going to speak to what you were talking more about the interviewing process and the importance of telling your story. I'm a survivor of severe childhood abuse, and I blocked it out for many years, and just in the last couple of years I remembered. And for me, talking about it and breaking that denial has been the most healing experience for me. to happen again, whether to other kids or to groups of people or whatever, keep talking about it and saying, yes, it has happened and this is what happened.
Right, great point.
Essential to break the denial.
Sometimes the survivors would be crying, and I would go to turn the tape recorder off to not get the tears, and they'd always stop me, pull my hand away, and say, the tears are part of it. This is what I need to tell. And I mean, isn't that a lot of the basis of psychotherapy? To face it, that it's better for you.
My question relates directly to the practice of oral history. And I'm wondering if either of you ever have misgivings or qualms about the accuracy of recollection. And recently there was a PBS documentary that caused somebody of an uproar because it was particularly called The Liberators. And on this program, there were both black and Jewish survivors, and black allegedly, who testified to liberating Jews from Dachau. And now that this is a historical inaccuracy, and both sides have testified to its veracity. So I wonder, in such an instance, how secure are you in your mission?
Good question.
Yeah, there's a wonderful book that was written, published last year by Judith Miller, a New York Times reporter, called One on One, I think, which is about histories. And she's got a great section in there on just this question you asked, the historical accuracy of oral history testimony versus the emotional accuracy of oral history testimony. And I think as we, progress through this craft, we have to learn that these issues exist and find kind of proper external ways for evaluating the information. I think that the testimonies contain great value. I think that before you take any given incident that a person claims occurred, you have to go through a process of documentation and verification that you would do in any other historical or ideally journalistic review that you were doing, and the real questions to be dealt with. And I think as the craft evolves, there will be more and more thought about this issue and developed about this issue in technical ways. But I don't think we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, therefore, oral history testimony is invalid because it can't be documented historically the way other factual material can. I would recommend Miller's book. She really goes into some detail on this question.
And you must come see us and look at some of the tapes and see the stories. We play up here on cable stations, too, so you can see it.
Maybe Paul has some thoughts about that.
I don't think you mentioned, but the court recorders of America, I don't know who they are, but they literally volunteer to transcribe these tapes. These are not only tapes, but they're transcribed in written form. For a historian interested in documenting finds it accessible. They don't have to skip through 2 or 4 hours, or some cases 9 hours of tape to find a paragraph, for example, to check where somebody is. Because the court recorders transcribe this, and then the person who made the tape re-edits that transcript so words that are slurred are eliminated, so that dates are corrected, and so forth. So what not only the visual document, which is important and significant and captures the emotional content as well, but you have the written document, so you can check and you can cross-check. And I'd like to illuminate, I saw the Liberators also, and we certainly have some questions about it. One of the problems in the Liberators is that the recall of the inmates who were liberated, they saw soldiers. But whether they were of this unit or not is unknown, because the inmates don't recognize American patches. They're entirely foreign. European armies don't use American patch designation. They would never identify a European soldier by looking at the kind of things that Americans identify units by. So they may be looking at individuals who are parts of detachments and are not parts of major units. So there may be, but I suspect that in time, with a little research, you have to remember that during wartime, anybody who's been in the Army, even in ordinary armies, we do make mistakes. And I've written morning reports that were fictitious. You know, you have to get it out quick. And not everything that ever occurred in the morgue is the equivalent of a death certificate in its accuracy. All military historians depend on it to verify what happened during that day. Well, they're not perfect. So I suspect eventually we'll find out who these units are. They're probably not as claimed on the film.
Well, I think the producers of that movie made one big mistake. They took a guy who actually was not in on the liberation of Buchenwald, and they took him to Europe, and they some stand-up interview with him at the site, and gave the impression that he was returning to the place that he had been during the war. And I think that's the piece in that documentary that's, if it's not explicitly inaccurate, it's certainly implicitly inaccurate. And then I think that one scene has called a lot of the other stuff into question. And there's a woman from Rutgers University who's writing a book on this now, on the implosion of these between the Jewish American community and the Black American community to find bonds between each other, and how this movie is an example of people getting their profiles raised by celebrity and by being interviewed, and then going through some strange emotional backfiring relationships in the process. And it's a very interesting story, and she's writing a book on it. I think as far as this movie goes, we've followed this pretty closely. I think the one mistake that they made was bringing this guy to Buchenwald and having him do this statement as though he was a returning person. And I think that's really the only inaccurate thing in the documentary. It's a terrible mistake. It's like NBC putting the extra fire in the gas tank in their documentary. It's a terrible thing. It happens in TV all the time. It's very sleazy. But unfortunately, it's cast aspersions on all the rest of the historical accuracy of the movie, which I don't think has come under the same kind of vulnerability as this one scene.
Just real quick, the gentleman back here with the dad had a couple of really good points, and one, and just deals real briefly, is for us to recognize some of our own intolerance to ideas on our own. But the other one was the idea that things like the Holocaust have happened in history, and they've been forgotten. Voices have been lost, and I think that's where the Oral History Project and the documentaries that we've seen are so crucially important. Because the voices are not going to be lost. They will be there when we are all dust, hopefully.
Right.
And it'll be something for people to look and see and reflect on and to say never again.
And what John was saying earlier, that history so far has too much been the history of kings and generals and queens and Princess Di, and just this is sort of what history is. And when I was an NPR reporter, I would often say, well, where are the stories of bus drivers? Where are the stories of the cafeteria workers? That those people have an equal, human role. And so it's a more democratic way of approaching society. Any real quick concluding thoughts? 2 seconds.
Questioning the veracity of the survivors of the oral history, I would like to say that there is enough documentation by the perpetrators to support what they are saying. There is enough written documentation by the perpetrators, fortunately.
Oh, good point. Well, this is Dr. Steiner's work. Real quick, Gene, and then...
One question I want to bring out, everybody should think about. Look around this room, and where are the black folks in America? Is not this subject a subject for all Americans, for all the world? And we have no black students in this class.
This woman and then the woman in the back.
I said that I think it would be a greater sin.
Oh, sorry, you're both talking at the same time. This woman first.
I think it would be a greater sin and a greater insult not to ask questions, not to do the interviews.
Right.
I just want to comment that I know a lot of black people, and
don't even want to approach the subject. Just the black friends, they want to know why I'm taking the class. They're angry that I'm taking the class. They're angry because they said there's no solution. They don't feel there's a solution here. They said, why would I want to go and hear about this stuff? We are experiencing this right now. I'm not going to go to a class and hear some more bitterness and some more, that horrid details when they've been beat up by policemen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're angry. They don't have any interest in it. They don't want to approach it. They don't feel that they're not saying where the solution is. Education is educating people who haven't had that experience. They want something to be done. They want retribution. They just don't want a bunch of talk. They want action. That's what a lot of the black people I know, that's their comment. They want action.
Well, I want action too, and I also feel that the Holocaust gives us perspective and teaches us a lot, about what's beautiful in life. I mean, that we were not in Auschwitz, gives me the strength to be a better fighter right now. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What I meant was not what he is doing. What I meant is that there's enough
Thanks very much.
I came in late, so I this is
Oh, sorry.
Hey.